My true story from Florida. After I became a widow, my daughter-in-law said, "Either you work or you're out." So I packed my things, then sold the house they'd been living in for free. The smell of buttercream frosting lingered in the air, sweet and heavy, as colorful balloons floated lazily above the crowd gathered in my son's living room. It was Ethan's 8th birthday, my only grandson. And for the past week, I had quietly looked forward to it like a child waiting for spring. I had spent hours knitting a navy blue scarf for him, choosing the softest yarn I could find, his favorite color. I wrapped it gently in brown paper tied with a blue ribbon. No card, no money, just the warmth of my hands in every stitch. That was what I could give. When Rosalind saw me emerge from the hallway, gift in hand, her smile tightened into something sour. She held a glass of wine in one hand and a phone in the other, swiping through photos she had just taken of the cake. I stood by the edge of the room, unnoticed at first, waiting for the right moment to hand Ethan the scarf. He was sitting cross-legged near the coffee table, surrounded by other children, his cheeks still smudged with chocolate frosting. "Ethan, sweetie," I said softly, kneeling beside him. "This is from Grandma." He looked up, uncertain. The room fell quiet for a second, the kind of hush that lingers before a slap. Ethan took the package hesitantly. His little fingers struggled with the ribbon, and I helped him untie it. When the scarf unfurled, Rosalind let out a laugh so sharp it could have sliced the cake in half. "A scarf! You gave him a handmade scarf," she said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "God, Mom, what is this, 1945? He is 8, not 80. The parents around the room chuckled. One of Rosalind's friends, a woman I had never met, whispered something behind a manicured hand and giggled. Ethan looked down at the scarf in his lap. He didn't smile. He didn't say thank you. He just folded it back up carefully, as if trying not to offend me or his mother. Rosalind kept going. "Maybe keep it for yourself, Mom. You know, wrap it around when you go out in case anyone needs reminding you're still alive, or use it for the next funeral. Might as well get some use out of it." I stood up slowly, my knees aching as they always did on colder days. I turned to Jake, my son, but he stared at the ground, hands in his pockets. Not a word, not a glance, just silence. That is what broke me. Not the laughter, not the insult, but the silence of the boy I raised alone while his father worked 2 jobs. The man I carried through measles, nightmares, and heartbreaks. He stood there and said nothing. And then came the words that would cut through everything I ever believed family to be. Rosalind walked up to me, leaned close, and spat the words like venom into my face. "I do not understand why you did not die with Dad. Honestly, you are just here existing, eating, breathing, being old and bitter. If you are not going to get a job, then do us all a favor and get out. Leave this house and do not come back ever. Do you understand?" The room went quiet again. No one laughed now, not even her friends. Even the children turned toward us, sensing something wrong. My hands were shaking. Not from fear, not from grief, but from something else. Something slow, deep, and rising. A kind of fury that simmers only after you have been hurt by the ones you once gave everything for. I looked at Ethan, who was holding the scarf against his chest, now confused, unsure if he should defend me or pretend not to see. I gave him a small smile, the kind that says it is okay when everything inside you says it is not. I turned, walked back toward the kitchen, past the leftover plates, past the soda-stained napkins, past the scraps of balloons tied to chairs. In the corner, there was a drawer no one ever opened, the kind of drawer that belonged to the person who used to run the home before it became someone else's. I opened it slowly, deliberately. Inside was a folder, faded yellow edges, soft like old paper. Inside that folder were the documents my late husband had left me. Our will, the property deed, bank account information, insurance papers. I pulled them out carefully, not with panic, not with fear, but with the steadiness of a woman who just stopped hoping her family would do right by her. There in black and white was my name, Margaret Edith Coleman, Judy Coleman on every envelope, every family photo, every Christmas card, but M. Coleman on the deed, the same name I had written on the first brick we laid beneath this house in 1978. The same name I used when I signed the loan that built it. The name my son no longer remembered, and my daughter-in-law never knew. I closed the folder, placed it gently back in the drawer, and closed it again with a soft click. I took a breath, then another. My hands were still now. I had not cried. Not once. Not even when Jake said nothing. Not even when Ethan looked away. Not even when the scarf I made was laughed at like a rag. That is when I knew. They had forgotten who I was, but I had not. They had erased me from their life story, but I still held the title to the house they called their own, and I was done waiting for them to remember. That night, I did not eat cake. I did not say goodbye. I did not make a scene or raise my voice. I sat on the edge of the bed in the guest room and stared at the scarf in my lap. I touched every loop, every knot, every soft curve of yarn. I had given them 37 years of my life, and they had given me an expiration date. But the thing about old women like me, we remember we do not shout, we do not break things. We build them and we end them quietly. Tomorrow I would start packing. The first time I saw the land, it was nothing but white sand and scrub. A flat, unassuming lot on the edge of a sleepy Florida town not far from the Gulf. Back in 1978, Jake was still a dream in our minds, and my husband Walter had just gotten a small promotion at the paper mill. We could not afford much, but we had plans, and that patch of sand looked just big enough to hold them. Walter had driven us there in our beat-up Chevy Nova. I remember stepping out barefoot, my toes sinking into the warm grit. The sun was setting, streaking the sky in oranges and bruised purples. I turned to him and said, "This is it." And he smiled like a boy who had just gotten away with something and said, "It will be." That first year was nothing but sweat and scraped palms. Walter refused to hire a contractor. He said he wanted us to build something with our own hands, something that would never be taken from us. We spent weekends pouring concrete sanding wood, learning from library books and kind neighbors who lent us tools. We laid the foundation ourselves, one bag of cement at a time. On hot afternoons, we ate peanut butter sandwiches on overturned paint cans. On cooler nights, we camped out under the stars, with only the frame of the future house rising behind us. There was a day one I remember clearer than most. When we laid the first brick of the living room wall, Walter handed it to me and said, "Go ahead, start it." I hesitated, looking at the smooth surface, the dry mortar waiting beneath it. Then, using the corner of a nail, I scratched my name into the side of the brick. A. Coleman, Margaret Edith. My maiden name, the name I had not used since I became his wife. But in that moment, it felt right, like a signature, like I was leaving proof that I had been here. Walter placed the brick, gently pressing it into the mortar. Then he looked at me and said, "When I am gone, this place will still belong to you. No matter who comes and goes, it is yours. Emmy Coleman's house." We built the walls, the roof, the porch with the swing I picked out from the Sears catalog. We planted a lemon tree in the back. We could not afford grass yet, so we laid down mulch and called it rustic. Every decision was shared. Every nail, every coat of paint, every scuffed tile in the kitchen, my fingerprints were there alongside his. It took us 2 years to finish. Jake was born just 3 months after we moved in. I can still see the bassinet we kept by the fireplace where the heat would gather in the winter. I remember holding him at night, rocking him in the same chair, where Walter would sit later, with his whiskey, and the newspaper boots, off socks, mismatched one foot, always tapping. That house was not perfect. The roof leaked in '83. The AC gave out twice during Florida summers that could melt the skin off your bones. We had to replace the plumbing after a hurricane backed up the drains, but it was ours and it was steady. Like Walter, he worked hard. So did I. I stayed home raised. Jake cooked, cleaned, made do with hand-me-downs and canned soup. I clipped coupons like it was a religion. I baked bread before it became trendy. I patched clothes until they were more patched than cloth. And not once did I feel poor because we had that house, because we had each other. Time moved like molasses. Then suddenly it ran like water. Jake grew up. The lemon tree bloomed, then stopped. Walter's hair thinned. Mine turned silver. We added a back porch. We hosted Christmas dinners, funerals, birthday parties. We made room for friends who lost homes, for nieces between jobs, for a cat that never left once it found the back door. Then came the year Walter got sick. The diagnosis was quick, the decline quicker. I remember sitting beside him in the hospital, holding his hand as his breath went shallow. He turned to me one last time and whispered, "Promise me you will stay in the house. It is still yours. No matter what Jake or anyone else says, I promised. I meant it." After he died, I lived alone for a while. At first, the silence was unbearable. Every creak of the floor, every ticking clock sounded like a voice missing. I kept his slippers by the bed. I talked to his chair like a fool. But the house, our house, held me. It kept me upright when I felt I would collapse. It reminded me I had lived, that I still mattered. When Jake and Rosalind offered for me to move in with them, I hesitated. But the loneliness had ate at you, and they made it sound like a kindness. "Come stay, Mom." Jake had said, "You should not be alone." Rosalind even kissed my cheek and said, "We will take care of everything." And so I packed a few things and left the house. Not for good, I thought, just for a season. I asked Jake to check in on it. He said he would. But the truth is, once I was gone, no one stepped foot in it again. The grass grew wild, the shutters peeled, and they treated it like a past they did not want to remember. But I never forgot. I still had the deed. Still had the name M.L. Coleman on every official document. Jake never asked. Rosalind never thought to check. They assumed that because I was old, quiet, and tired, I had also become powerless. But power is not in noise. It is in memory, in the way a brick holds its place even after decades of storms. And that house, my house, still remembered who it belonged to. I had not set foot in it since Walter's funeral. But now, as I sat in a home I no longer recognized as mine, surrounded by people who treated me like a ghost they forgot to bury, I realized something. It was time to go back. Walter's funeral was short, cold, and far too clean. There were no stories, no tears, no laughter and remembrance, just plastic chairs, lukewarm coffee, and Rosalind showing up 30 minutes late in a wine-red dress that hugged her waist like she was headed for a cocktail hour, not a burial. She kissed the air near my cheek, not touching, and whispered, "Sorry, traffic," as if that explained the mascara still wet under her lashes. Jake did not say much that day. He stood beside the casket like a man waiting for a bus, eyes hollow, mouth tight. I sat alone during the reception, a paper plate of macaroni salad untouched in my lap. No one offered me a seat beside them. No one asked if I was eating. I watched as Rosalind chatted near the wine table, laughing at something someone said about old-school men who never went to therapy. After the service, Jake took me aside and said, "Mom, come stay with us. You should not be alone right now." I looked at him, searching his face for sincerity, for anything that resembled the boy I once held to my chest during lightning storms. But all I saw was exhaustion and something else. Obligation. Still, I nodded, because grief makes you say yes to anything that sounds like shelter. The first week at their house was quiet. I stayed in the guest room, made my bed each morning, folded my towels neatly. Rosalind was cordial, even warm at first. She brought me herbal tea and told me to settle in. Ethan, my grandson, peeked into my room every morning before school and whispered, "Hi, Grandma," like a secret he was not supposed to share. But by the second week, things began to shift. The herbal tea stopped appearing. The guest room towels disappeared and were replaced with a single hand towel. I began cooking breakfast one morning, eggs and toast, the way Walter liked them, and Rosalind walked in, eyebrows arched. "Oh," she said, staring at the pan. "You cook now." "I thought I'd help," I replied, smiling. She blinked once. "Just make sure you clean everything. I hate grease. And please don't season the eggs too much. Ethan's palate is delicate." From then on, I cooked every morning and lunch and dinner. I did laundry. I scrubbed the bathrooms. I vacuumed. I picked Ethan up from school when Rosalind had errands. I stayed silent through most dinners because, as Rosalind explained once in front of Jake, mealtime is for processing, not for noise. One evening, as we all sat around the dinner table eating takeout Chinese, I asked if anyone wanted more rice. Rosalind froze her chopsticks midair. "Mom," she said, her voice sweet as antifreeze, "we're trying to teach Ethan about boundaries. Dinner is a no-interruption zone, remember?" I nodded. Jake did not look up. A few nights later, I found myself craving something cold. I tiptoed to the fridge, careful not to wake anyone, and poured half a glass of milk. Just half. I was about to sip it when Rosalind's voice cut through the dark. Seriously? I turned to find her standing in the hallway, arms crossed. She walked in, flipped on the kitchen light, and pointed to the glass in my hand. "Booze is off limits in this house after 9, she said sarcastically. "Oh wait, it's just milk. Are we rationing childhood now? You drinking up Ethan's future too?" I did not respond. I simply put the glass down, washed it, and went back to my room. A week later, I had a doctor's appointment. Arthritis in my knees had flared up, and I needed a refill on my prescription. I took the bus there and back, stopping to pick up groceries along the way. Chicken thighs, a small tub of yogurt, and a bouquet of sunflowers on sale for $2.79. I arrived home around 6:30 p.m. The porch light was off. My key turned, but the door would not budge. I knocked softly, then louder. Rain began to fall. Light at first, then heavy. I knocked again, this time calling out, "Jake, Rosalind." No answer. After 20 minutes, I walked to the side of the house, sheltered under the narrow overhang, and sat on the patio bench, clutching the sunflowers to my chest. When the door finally opened, Rosalind stood there with a towel and a frown. "Oh," she said flatly. "We thought you were in your room. We locked up early. You should have called." "I do not have a cell phone," I reminded her gently. She tossed the towel at me. "Maybe it's time you get with the times or stop wandering like a stray cat." The next morning, I reached into my drawer for my arthritis medication. The bottle was gone. I checked the bathroom, my purse, my coat pockets. Nothing. At breakfast, I asked if anyone had seen it. Rosalind sipped her coffee without looking up. I threw it out. My heart stopped. You what? You heard me? She leaned back in her chair. You're already halfway to the grave. Why waste time numbing it? Jake cleared his throat. Rosalind, no, she snapped. I'm serious. We have a child in this house. I don't want pill bottles lying around. She can drink our milk fine, but no pills. I stood there for a moment stunned. My knees screamed in protest from yesterday's walk, and now they would have no relief. But more than that, I felt something shift. It was not just rudeness. It was not even cruelty. It was the moment I became disposable. I went back to my room, closed the door, and stared at the wall. And then I began to plan. It started with whispers. That is how Eraser begins, not with fire, but with murmurs. I was walking past the living room one afternoon carrying a basket of freshly folded towels when I heard one of Rosalind's friends say, "Oh my God, she's still here." The other woman, someone I recognized from church years ago, snorted, "I thought she passed with her husband. Didn't she have, what was it, early dementia or something?" They both laughed. Rosalind did not correct them. Later that evening, she handed me my mail, a small stack she had kept on the hallway table unopened. There was a bank statement among them. I noticed the envelope was already sliced open. "You opened my mail?" I asked, keeping my voice level. She smiled. "Oh, Mom, come on. It's not like you're running a business empire. I just wanted to make sure your pension deposits were still coming in." That week, she asked if she could help manage my monthly checks. "You're not spending much," she said sweetly. "And with inflation, it's easier if I keep your card with me. Just to grab groceries? Stuff for the house." I refused at first, but she brought it up again, this time in front of Jake. "She's getting forgetful," Rosalind said. "Yesterday she boiled water and left the stove on for an hour." "I turned it off," I replied. "The kettle whistles when it's ready." Jake looked uncomfortable. "Maybe let Rosalind help a bit, Mom, just to be safe." The next day my bank card disappeared. I never saw it again. One evening, Ethan climbed into bed with me. He was holding a comic book and a juice box. He snuggled under my quilt and whispered, "Grandma, is it true you're not really part of our family anymore?" I froze. "Why would you say that, sweetheart?" "Because Mom said when people get really old, sometimes they stop being family. She said you're, what's the word, obsolete." He pronounced it slowly like it was a spell he did not understand. I hugged him close, holding in the tears until he fell asleep. The next morning, I confronted Jake while Rosalind was out. "Jake, what exactly is going on here?" "Ethan said some very strange things about me not being part of the family." Jake sighed. "Mom, you've been difficult lately. Difficult. I cook your meals. I clean your house. I've raised your son while you work. What exactly have I done that's difficult?" He rubbed his temples. "It's just, this is Rosalind's home now. I need you to respect her space." I stared at him. "This is the house I paid for, that I built. Your father and I know Mom." He cut in quietly. "This is Emily's house. She and I have the mortgage now, the property taxes, the upkeep. You are a guest." It took everything in me not to scream. That night, Rosaline handed me a manila folder over dinner. "We had our attorney draft some documents for you," she said. "Just some housekeeping stuff. Sign them when you can." Inside was a power of attorney document with fields that would give them full control over the house, my finances, and even my medical decisions. "You can sign here," she pointed. "It's just standard." I stared at the lines, at the way they had already filled in my name, at the way Jake avoided my eyes across the table. I let my hand tremble. "My signature is not steady tonight. Maybe tomorrow." Rosalind narrowed her eyes. "You can just make a mark. We'll have it notarized later." "I'd like to sleep on it," I said, folding the papers neatly. She forced a smile. "Sure, tomorrow." Then I returned to my room, closed the door, and sat down on the edge of the bed. My heart was pounding, but my mind was still. For the first time in months, it was clear. They were not just trying to control me. They were trying to erase me. But I had been underestimated before, and I had survived worse, and now it was time to prepare. Quietly, completely, and without a word to anyone. I had almost forgotten where I kept the original copy of Walter's will. It had not seen the light of day since the week after his funeral, when I read it alone at the dining room table. One lamp lit the rest of the house in silence. I found it again tucked beneath an old quilt in my suitcase, folded beside a photograph of us standing in front of the house in 1979, the porch still unfinished behind us. The name on the deed was clear as day, Margaret Edith Coleman. Walter had always insisted we keep the house in my name, said it was his way of giving me something no one could ever take. Men die, he'd said, but bricks and paper, Don't forget. He had arranged everything with his attorney long before the cancer came. The property, the savings, everything was written under M. Coleman. They had never bothered to ask who that was. That was their first mistake. Their second mistake, thinking I had nowhere else to go. One crisp morning, I dressed in my best blouse, navy blue, same color as the scarf they had mocked, and took the bus to the local bank, the same one Walter and I had used for decades. I walked in, presented my ID, and requested access to the dormant joint account listed in the will. The banker, a young woman with kind eyes, asked me to wait. 15 minutes later, she returned smiling. Mrs. Coleman, the account is intact. Balance is $612,000 with accrued interest. Would you like to update the access credentials? I nodded once steady. Yes, and I'd like to order a new checkbook. The third mistake Rosalind made was assuming silence meant surrender. From that day forward, I began to document everything. I turned an empty cookie tin, one of the gingerbread jars Ethan used to sneak candy from, into a listening post. A tiny recording device inside captured days of whispered insults, snapped commands, and manipulative threats. Your memory's slipping, old woman, Rosalind once hissed as I reached for the salt at dinner. Maybe it's time you forget where your bedroom is and just walk off a cliff. Jake rarely spoke up anymore. If he noticed, he pretended not to. I recorded it all. One evening, she left a voicemail after I forgot to vacuum the guest bathroom. You've got one job here. Exist quietly. If you can't even manage that, what good are you? I saved the message under a folder labeled proof. I started keeping a notebook too. Each date, each insult, each time they left me outside in the rain, or shut the door just a little too hard, I wrote it all down, because stories fade, but records they endure. Then I called Walter's old attorney, Mr. Alvarez. He was retired mostly, but he still handled estate transfers for a few trusted clients. I explained everything to him, down to the birthday party scarf, the milk, the missing pain pills. He listened without interrupting. When I was done, he said, Margaret, are you sure? I looked him straight in the eye. I'm done being erased. Within a week, we had drawn up papers to transfer the house not to Jake, not to Rosalind, but to a young Latin couple with 2 daughters. Both parents working double shifts, but dreaming of a backyard for their kids. I had met them once briefly through the church's food pantry program. They reminded me of Walter and myself in the early days. Raw hope wrapped in hard work. The sale price was modest. I did not want profit. I wanted peace. The date of sale, March 14th, Rosalind's birthday. The closing appointment was scheduled at 10 a.m. sharp. I wore Walter's watch, packed my suitcase the night before, folded my clothes as tight as my resolve. That morning I made breakfast one last time. Scrambled eggs, toast, coffee for Jake, tea for Rosalind. She barely looked up from her phone. You're unusually chipper, she muttered. Just savoring the morning, I replied. At 9 o'clock I placed the final batch of ginger cookies on the counter. Recording device now removed, and walked to my room. Picked up my suitcase, slipped the manila folder of documents into my purse. Paused once by Ethan's door. He was still asleep, mouth slightly open, hands curled under his chin, like he was dreaming of something too soft for this house. At 9:50, I walked into Mr. Alvarez's office. He was waiting, papers ready, smiles small but firm. Still sure? He asked. Now more than ever, I signed each page slowly, carefully. No tremble, no hesitation. The final signatures sliced through the last illusion of their control, like a knife through warm cake. When it was done, I stood. Would you like to notify them yourself? Mr. Alvarez asked. I shook my head. No, I said. They'll feel it soon enough. By evening, the house would no longer be theirs, and by morning, neither would I. I left before sunrise. The house was still asleep, the kind of quiet that felt earned, not the silence of tension, but of peace before a storm. I zipped my small suitcase, the one with the scuffed wheels and faded navy stripes. I folded my nightgown neatly inside, along with 2 sweaters, my Bible, the photo of Walter holding baby Jake, and the deed now officially signed, sealed, and transferred. On the kitchen table beside the cookie jar that had once hidden their recorded cruelty, I placed a folded note. My handwriting was clear, deliberate. I release you from the burden of my presence. This house is no longer yours. Please vacate in peace. No signature. They would know. I stepped out into the morning air, cool, clean, the kind of breeze that told you change had arrived. Not loudly, but with certainty. I did not look back. By Monday, the official papers were delivered, a notice of sale, a demand to vacate, certified, notarized, and backed by the full weight of the law. The new owners would arrive within the week. Rosalie opened the envelope at the dining table. Jake was beside her, Ethan upstairs. "What is this?" she hissed. Jake read it, then read it again, slower. This is real," he mumbled. "The house." "No," Rosalie barked, standing. "No. No, no, no. I have lived here for 12 years. We painted the nursery. We built the patio. We hosted Thanksgiving here." She was already dialing her phone. "I'm calling the police." Jake did not move. When the officers arrived, Rosalind was screaming about fraud, about elderly confusion, about being deceived. She waved papers, showed them family photos on the wall, pointed to Ethan's artwork on the fridge. They asked for proof of ownership. Jake opened the safe. Inside were the original documents, untouched, unaltered. Every one of them bore the name M. Coleman. The officer, a tall man with a calm voice, turned to Rosalind. "Ma'am, the deed is clear. Your mother-in-law had full legal authority. The new owner has every right to take possession." Rosalind collapsed into the couch, shaking. Jake sat down on the floor beside the safe, staring at the pages as if they were written in a language he had never learned. That night, Ethan found the note I had left under his pillow. I had slipped it there the morning I left, tucked beneath the corner where he always rested his head. It read simply, "Even when the world forgets kindness, you must remember it." "I love you," he cried. Then he found his old Chromebook and sent me an email. Subject: "Please come back." Body: "Grandma. I do not believe what they said. I know you are not gone forever. I miss you. I miss the way your cookies smelled. I miss the way you made the blankets warm before bedtime. Are you safe? Please tell me you are safe. If you forgive us, can I come visit you? Love, Ethan." My lawyer received it. He forwarded it to me along with a message from Jake. Jake's was shorter. "Mom, I know you are angry. You have every right to be. Please let us talk. Ethan is devastated. Rosalind is processing things badly, but I take full responsibility. I should have protected you. I am sorry. Please give us a chance to fix this." I sent only one message back, typed by my lawyer, signed by me. "I forgive you, but I will not return. Once is enough. I will not stand where I was pushed." And that was the end of it. My new home was small, just 2 bedrooms, a narrow galley kitchen, and a balcony that caught the sea breeze every morning. It overlooked a line of palm trees and a patch of wild grass that swayed like it remembered dancing. There were no echoes of slammed doors, no cautious footsteps, just the gentle hum of the waves and the rhythm of my own breathing. I bought a used bicycle and rode it to the corner cafe every morning. I read books, ones I had always meant to read, now dog-eared and tea-stained. I baked ginger cookies this time for neighbors who smiled when they smelled cinnamon on the breeze. No one in my building called me a burden. The mailman asked about my day. The landlord fixed the leak in my sink within 24 hours. I had forgotten what dignity felt like when it was given freely, but even with peace there was something else. Something that refused to rest. All those women I had seen over the years in waiting rooms, on buses, walking home from shifts with their shoulders hunched like the world pressed too hard. Women who raised children alone, who were told they were too loud, too old, too dependent. I saw pieces of myself in all of them, and I remembered what it felt like to be invisible. So I used a portion of Walter's money, my money, to create the Me Hope Fund. M.E. for Margaret. Edith for the name they forgot, for the woman who refused to stay erased. Hope for every woman who needed a roof, a meal, a second chance. We started small. Grocery vouchers, rent assistance, 1-week motel stays for mothers escaping bad homes. But it grew fast. A local news anchor picked up the story. A retired accountant offered to help. Within 6 months, we were funding scholarships at the community college and running a hotline staffed by retired grandmothers who knew what silence felt like. One day I received a letter from the new family living in my old house. Handwritten, careful penmanship. "Dear Miss Coleman, we cannot thank you enough. We have never had a backyard before. My daughter planted her first sunflower last week. My husband says this house feels like breathing. We hope to honor your kindness. We promise to take care of every wall." I hung it on my fridge. That fall, the college invited me to speak at a women's leadership seminar. I almost said no. I had never been one for microphones. But something in me, perhaps the part that had survived by going unheard, rose up. I wore a navy scarf that morning. Not the same one they had laughed at, but similar. My hands did not shake as I stepped up to the podium. "There are people," I said, "who live quietly, not because they are weak, but because they were taught their voices were interruptions, not contributions. But silence is not peace. It is a debt we pay for others' comfort. The auditorium was still when I finished. No laughter, just a long-standing silence that felt like reverence. Later, as I was packing up my notes, a woman approached me. Her eyes were glassy, and she held a toddler on her hip. "You saved us," she said. "That grant, it got us out. I'm in school now. We're safe." She reached out, squeezed my hand, and added, "Thank you, Grandma of Hope." The nickname stuck, and I found to my surprise I did not mind. Then one crisp afternoon, as the air turned to early winter and the sea lost some of its warmth, I found a letter in my mailbox. No return address, just my name in boyish handwriting I knew too well. Inside was a single page torn from a notebook. "Dear Grandma, I know you are mad at everyone, maybe even me, but I wanted to say I am sorry. I am really, really sorry. I miss you. I miss your cookies. I miss the way you read stories and made me laugh even when I had a bad day. I do not believe what Mom said about you. I never did. I did not know how to say it before. If you forgive me, would you maybe knit me a scarf like the blue one you gave me for my birthday? I still have it. I keep it under my pillow. Love, Ethan. P.S. I told my teacher about the M.E. Hope Fund. She said, you are amazing." I held that letter in my lap for a long time. Then I picked up my yarn and I began to knit. The porch creaked softly beneath my chair, the wood warm from the afternoon sun. My hands moved in rhythm, looping the yarn, pulling it through, forming rows of soft navy stitches, the same blue as before. Only this time the gift would reach the heart that had never truly closed. The scarf was almost done. I had chosen a pattern simple and quiet, like the boy who had once tiptoed into my room clutching a comic book and a juice box. A postcard sat on the table beside me. The address already written in careful script to Ethan Coleman. The wind picked up, carrying the salt of the sea. I paused, looked out over the horizon, and remembered the way Walter used to sit beside me, one hand on my knee, the other holding the morning paper. He used to say, "You do not need to shout, Mags. When you live deep enough, the world goes quiet just to hear you think." He was right. For years I thought being quiet was something done to me, a silencing, a punishment. But now I saw it clearly. Silence could also be a choice, a kind of power. One that waited, one that watched. And one day when the time was right, it answered. I never wanted revenge. I wanted remembrance. To be seen, yes, but more than that, to be respected for what I had endured, for what I had built, for the invisible strength that carried generations forward without needing applause. I opened my notebook, the same one I had used to record the insults, the legal documents, the appointments with Mr. Alvarez, but now its final pages were filled with something else. The first draft of a letter I had written, addressed not to a judge or a bank or even my son, but to anyone who had ever been made to feel small. Here is what it said. To whoever finds themselves called a burden, you are not alone. If you have ever stood in the kitchen and heard your name twisted into shame. If you have ever been told that your value is measured in productivity, not presence. If you have ever swallowed your truth just to keep peace in a room where no one noticed you, I want you to know this. You are the root, not the leaves that dance in sunlight, not the fruit that draws praise, but the root, deep, steady, unseen. You are what holds the whole thing together. And one day when the leaves fall and the branches crack, someone will look back and understand that it was you who kept the tree alive. Do not wait for their applause. They will not always offer it. Live quietly, live well, and when you go, let it be on your terms, not as someone cast out, but as someone who simply decided to bloom elsewhere. With love and respect, Judy, Ma'am Pullman. I folded the scarf, placed it in a soft cotton bag, tucked the postcard inside, and sealed it. At the post office, the clerk smiled as he weighed the package. "Birthday gift," he asked. "Something like that," I said. That evening I returned to the porch. The sky was stray with gold and lavender. I sipped my tea and listened to the birds, the waves, and my own breath. No shouting, no chaos, just peace, and the quiet certainty that I had not been erased. I had simply chosen when and how to speak. Thank you for listening to my story. If this memory stirred something in your heart, if you've ever been overlooked, underestimated, or called a burden, I hope you carry this truth with you. Silence is not weakness, and dignity has no expiration date. I may have lived most of my life in the background, but when the time came, I remembered who I was, and I acted not out of rage, but out of remembrance. This was not just a story, it was my life, and I have more to tell.